Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members-only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that, plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. We had take two last night, right? Second try at this. It worked out a little better than the first time. Although I guess, at this point, we're you don't know what history is until you're in the present, right? History's always changing. I guess in some ways, as bleak and as horrifying as that first debate was, the only debate of that campaign, we're in a different campaign. I guess we start to see it a little differently. It was terrible, but I think most of us are glad we're here now and not there, right? So maybe, I don't want to say it was a blessing in disguise. In any case, I'm kind of going off on a funny tangent here, but it's hard to think how you see these things in retrospect. In any case, as you know, we had the big debate, maybe the only debate, although I guess as we've gone through the morning, that sort of seems to be a work in progress as sort of we sort of see who wants what. But you had the debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. My sense, and I was thinking about this last night, and I thought about doing a little post on it, but I didn't want to tempt fate. But what was striking to me is that going into the debate, my sense is that the expectations of Harris were kind of low. I don't mean that people necessarily thought she would do badly, but there wasn't this sense, or at least that wasn't my perception, that people were thinking, "Oh my God, she's just going to destroy him," and like let's get the popcorn and just see this like kind of like a bullfight, right? Where she's gonna end him. Maybe some of that is because that Time Siena poll from a few days ago had a big deflating impact on a lot of people. I think apart from that poll, it's clear that the race had kind of stabilized in the sense of like, she's not going up a point every 3 days as she sort of had been through August. But for each of those reasons, and maybe it's just the overhang of the experience of that last debate. Like, can things go really wrong? Well, actually, yeah, they can. Like, they can go more wrong than you can even imagine. And Trump is a canny guy, right? He's got that sort of degenerate, destabilizing energy. So my sense, at least, was that the expectations of her were not crazy high, and that's a good thing, right? You want to, as long as you exceed those expectations, that is not a bad thing. And I just give you a little before I bring my colleague and co-host Kate in to give us her sense. My sense, the only slightest wobble she had was that during the first minute or two, she was nervous, or at least had, butterflies or something like that. She felt a little wobbly, not bad, but you could tell she had some nerves. But it changed pretty quickly. I would say within 4 or 5 minutes of the debate beginning, he was mad. He was already angry. It happened really fast. And it was clear within the first 10 or 15 minutes, she's running the debate. she's controlling the tempo. She's speaking, he's reacting to her. It came together pretty quickly, and as you know, if you watched, it didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. She was, I mean, and again, we've we've talked about this not just in the context of debates, but in the context of political campaigns. You want to be the one acting, and your opponent is reacting to you. You're really only going to hold your own reacting. You can't win reacting when the other person is holding the initiative, uh, controlling the pace, making you react to them, being in the dominant position. And that is, if anything, even more the case with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump's entire thing is dominance. So if he's not dominating, that's what he has. And she totally dominated him the entire night. And as you could see over the time that the debate went forward, he could feel it. He knew he was being dominated, and he was angry and rattled. And anger, anger is a powerful thing for Donald Trump. Anger is in a way his whole game, but it's a predatory, winning anger, right? That's what his fans like about him. He's a predator in every sense of the word. In the gendered interpersonal sense, as we know, in the political sense. But last night, he was the prey. Kamala Harris was preying on him, and that anger was not the predatory, dominating anger that is his his wheelhouse. It was spittle anger. It was an anger that was getting him rattled and throwing him off his game. And I think, I at various points in that debate, I was trying to get a sense, and in a way it barely matters except for what you might call technical debating points. Like, was she leading him into these moments where he spent 5 minutes explaining how January 6th was awesome, and also Nancy Pelosi did it, and all this kind of stuff? Was she leading him into those moments? Or did she just rattle him so hard that he went to his known places? That's where he's going to go to. That's who he is. That's what he wants to talk about. So if he's rattled, he's going to go to those places. He's not going to say, all right, I got to keep it a little together. I got to be a little normal. I got to do what my campaign people told me about. Just talk about inflation and talk about the border, and that's it. Don't be weird. And I'm not totally sure. I think it was a little bit of both. But she rattled him, and you could tell in his body language. You have these split screens, and like I said, she was a little wobbly first 2 or 3 minutes, something like that. Had some nerves, and then she got her sea legs, and then maybe by halfway into it, she moved into, like, she's happy, she's smiling. And there's this thing about Donald Trump. For people who can't stand the guy, for people who hate the guy and what he represents and the menace that he represents to everything a lot of us hold dear as Americans. For those people, I think a lot of those people have a handful of lines they've been waiting for someone to say to Donald Trump's face. Why won't you stop lying? You are a liar. You're a pathological liar. You don't stop lying. This, that, and the other. She over the course of that debate, she said almost every one of those lines. on democracy, on lying, on being a rapist, right to his face. And by halfway through the debate, she could tell she was really kind of destroying him. And she was baiting him, and he was taking the bait every single time. And you had these split screens where she is, in her element, saying the whole thing, saying the line, saying it right to his face, looking at him. And you see him on split screen, and he's like, I thought at one moment he might eat his own lips. Right? He's like chewing his lips, and he's wincing, and that was the whole thing. And when I wrote about this last night, I don't know if you had a chance to see, my wrap up. Kate was doing the live, sort of the official TPM live blog. When I tried to recap it, I trying to, I'm not sure we need reminding, but remind ourselves that you can win a debate and lose an election. It's not like he's going to drop to 30% now or something like that. But in the context of this debate, she crushed him. I don't think that's hyperbole. She owned the debate from the very first moments, got in kind of every, when you're doing debate prep, you've got 100 lines you want your candidate to get in, and you're looking for a moment that it's natural to get this, that, or the other line in. And maybe you get in a half dozen. That's pretty good. She seemed to get in every single one because he was just on the ropes the whole time. So how much it changes, I don't know. My overall sense is that she needed a debate where she showed she could hold her own with him and be in charge. That's what she needed to take this to the next step, and she got that. But within the confines of this one debate, that one night, I don't know how she could have done any better or dominated him more thoroughly. I've gone a little long. Forgive me. I'm feeling kind of good about last night. But Kate, what do you think? What's your take? What happened last night?
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for her. I agree that in the first 2 to 3 questions, I was kind of worried that we might be looking at something of a draw. She did seem a little nervous, not as fluent as she usually is, but it took almost no time for her to warm up and hit her stride. And well within the first hour, she was palpably enjoying the debate. And you could tell that as a viewer because I found myself having anticipation for when it would get tossed back to her to kind of hear what she would say. And it's funny because a common pitfall in debate performance is when your preparation is too evident to the audience, which is like a little bit of a silly line you have to thread because, of course, most candidates prepare for this, day in and day out, and you've got lines prepared and talking points and kind of canned statements. But as we've seen before, that can completely backfire. When a candidate says something that feels like it was extracted right from a kind of consultant proof, focus group room, that stuff never reads very well. It comes off as kind of plasticky and inauthentic. But her prepared kind of attacks and lines and jabs, I think overall came across authentic and really effective. And if that's encapsulated in the moment where you could tell her team had planned early on for her to try to rattle him, to get under his skin. And by some metrics, you could say that happened in the very first seconds of the debate, where she marched over to his lectern and kind of forced the handshake that it seemed like he was trying to avoid. So she walked all the way over to his side of the stage, said, "Kamala Harris, let's have a good debate," and went back to her lectern. And from those first moments, it felt like she's the assertive one. He's the cowering one. And that impression just optically carried throughout, because she was making constant eye contact with him, both when she was talking and when she was listening. And he, it was as if he had his hand up, trying to make his own blinder so he didn't have to look at her. And then that
Like
comes
those
to
things they have horses wear, right? So
exactly.
they don't get upset.
And then that comes to a head in this early moment, which should have been one of Trump's best moments. And this is really important because the first 30 minutes to an hour of a debate, that is when most people watch who are watching. After that, people tend to, turn it off. That is when nearly all of the debate coverage is framed. It's very hard for someone to kind of mount a comeback performance that's strong enough that it changes the perception of how things are going. And in that time, there was a big abortion section, right? That's a big win for Harris. That is her big issue. That is his weak issue. There was January 6th stuff, ditto. However, this has been clearly planned out to also have what should have been Trump's strong section, which is immigration. That's the issue he talked about all night. That's what he wanted to return to. And yet, in this opening bout over immigration, what comes up? It's the bill that he told his Republican flunkies to kill in Congress. And then she slips in the jab about, you should go to a Trump rally sometimes, Hannibal Lecter, windmills, people leave early because they're exhausted and bored, and he's only talking about himself and he's not talking about you. And that was the moment really that she won the debate, because again, this was an immigration section. This is his bread and butter. And when he got thrown the mic after she made that jab, he burned the first 45 seconds of his answer saying, no, my rallies rock, best rallies politics I've ever seen, no one goes to her rallies, why would you go, they bust people in. And he didn't even take a bite at the immigration apple, which was very, very clearly his mandate going into this, was turn it into immigration at every single turn. And from that point on, he was angry. He started kind of shouting all of his answers. He does that stuff where he gets kind of sullen and sulky, and that was kind of playing all over his face. He was fighting with the moderators a little bit, like insisting on kind of getting in more rebuttals, even when, it was pretty clear he was just getting enough rope to keep hanging himself at that point. And I think that was the early turning point where she had clearly settled in, she had hit her stride, and it was just so easy for her to get under his skin that I'm sure somewhere in her brain she was thinking like, well, that worked better than anticipated, like onwards and upwards.
Yeah, I had a very similar impression. If anything, I think I had a slightly different sense of what the turning point was, or kind of when the debate was kind of over. I think partly is that when I was first watching, I didn't put together that she saw, okay, this is the immigration opening, I need to throw in this extraneous and kind of absurd line about people getting bored at his rallies and leaving, which, like, if she told one lie, that must be it, right? Because does that happen? Do people get bored and leave early? Okay, maybe they do. Okay, so they do leave early, but like, it doesn't matter. The point is that she's there with like a cane pole with like a little shiny object hanging from a string that just sticks in front of him, and he can't resist it. When that happened, I didn't put that together. I knew she sort of threw that in, but I didn't catch that sort of trick aspect of it. I just saw it unfold. It seemed sort of organic. To me, it was, and again, I think these happened within moments of each other, it was the extended exchange on abortion. She didn't just say, I'm going to restore abortion rights. I'm going to protect your abortion rights. First of all, he went off on the always nonsensical, I'm for the protections, I'm for your rights. Also, I banned abortion. Also, they're executing, they execute you at your 6-month visit, right? I mean, they're just this kind of parade of nonsense. And the cadence of it allowed her, in a very uncanned way, to talk about the real life impacts of what she called the Trump abortion bans that lots of states have, the Trump abortion bans, which, as we know, Trump is trying to say, hey, I'm hands off, letting every state do what, do its will, democracy. That's what I love. Trump abortion bans, talking about, women bleeding out in parking lots. I don't remember all the anecdotes, but I think she hit on young rape victims, women who are, again, dying, and needing to get close enough to dying to get medical care. All the parade of horribles that, again, got past the send me a bill, I'll sign it, protecting your rights. It was intense and connected. And that's kind of what, in a different kind of way, that was one of those moments that, in my mind, people want to hear. People want someone to say to his face, what is wrong with you? A woman who wants to have a family, and she miscarries, she's hemorrhaging, she's in all these kind of things, right to his face. And again, there was something about that where, in many ways, this is the central issue. It's certainly the most powerful issue the Democrats have. For a lot of people, it is the most important issue in the whole campaign. And she went past planned hits, promises, to just like, let's just have a little seminar about this, about the terrible things that are happening. And he just, let her do it.
Yeah, I actually think her abortion answer was her strongest of the whole night, because it's honestly the first time I've heard a Democrat talk like that about abortion. Because, as you say, the rebuttal is constantly, we want to bring back Roe. He got rid of Roe. Doesn't that suck? But her response was, it was more tailored to what his team clearly sees as his best abortion talking point, which is this has been divisive for forever. We're returning it to the states, and this is what people want. And this is the first time I have heard a Democratic politician respond, well, it's sure not what everyone wants, and it's not what the women who are being affected by these bans want. And I thought it was so kind of moving and refreshing to hear it, what is a fundamentally kind of political response to the situation, taken into the kind of real life ramification realm. And it's such an effective rebuttal to that of, well, everyone wants the states to decide. And she's like, well, no, they don't. A lot of people want to have protections. And I thought she did that in a pitch perfect way. And then, we'll get to the moderators in a little bit, who I thought were just excellent, but they also had one of their big moments of the night in this exchange, where then things move to, okay, Trump, where are you on a national abortion ban? And that has got to be one of the most damaging parts of the night for him, because he refused to answer, word salad, word salad, word salad. And then Lindsay.
But as you say, not word salad to the point where he wasn't very clear. I'm not going to say I'm going to veto it.
Right. He just did the kind of, he did what Nikki Haley did in the primary, which was, well, it'll never get the vote, so it really doesn't matter. And then Lindsay Davis came back and said, this is a yes or no. Would you veto an abortion ban? Your vice president, J.D. Vance, said you would veto an abortion ban. And Trump basically said, who, I've never met him, and then does more of the, and then weirdly did she'll never get the votes. It doesn't matter, because she'll never be able to raise the number of votes needed to kind of pass that, which is like moving into a hypothetical where not only is Harris the president, but she's trying to pass a national abortion ban. So the whole thing was bizarre, but really damaging, because in that specific moment, I think his kind of squishiness came across so politician-y, whereas hers, as I said, was a distinct note from how Democrats have typically been talking about abortion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's just that. I mean, I'm just I believe it so deeply I can't help but like agree with you again. There's a clear majority of people in this country, a big majority of people in this country, in the 60s, who think you should have Roe type abortion rights. There is a substantially larger percentage of people in this country who hear these stories about 11-year-old girls having to jump through hoops to get an abortion after being impregnated by a father or an uncle or just some random rapist, hearing about women who have a failed pregnancy, almost losing their lives. People hear this stuff and are just like, what? They're aghast. And she told those stories. And as you say, that's not something Democrats always do. You get hung up on the technical details of different pieces of legislation and so forth. Like, she's not only kind of hitting this in the way that her political campaign wants. I think the sort of the board of Planned Parenthood was looking at that and saying, wow, we've been waiting for this for so, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't just at the level of succeeding in electoral political terms. It was, just, as you said, it was, to me, that was like the center point. And when I wrote about it, thinking like that was the moment she kind of iced the debate, was just that, that's her issue. And she said, she nailed it, and we saw it.
Yeah, and I don't want to diminish giving her credit, but on the other hand, it is shocking that Trump was so woefully unprepared for an obvious question, right? Like, everyone in the world knew he was going to get, will you veto an abortion ban? I mean, everyone in the world knew that he was going to get, some version of, you say leave it to the states, but X, right? But what about women bleeding out? What about a 6-week ban? Whatever. He knew he was going to get some version of that, and he was completely flustered and completely unprepared for it. And that was also, as strong as she was, and I think she was very strong. I mean, he was dismal. He was terrible. He was unprepared for everything. I mean, even his kind of quote unquote strong points on immigration were just hodgepodges of little right wing nods that you would only understand if you're totally steeped in that world, which brings us
Yeah.
to kind of the other big early disaster for him, I would say, which was also one of the moments where the moderators intervened to great effect, which was when he repeated this shockingly racist conspiracy theory, being kind of first and foremost spearheaded by J.D. Vance, which is that Haitian immigrants in Ohio are eating people's pets. I mean, it's so bad that I kind of felt like I'd gotten to a point where their racism and the xenophobia, I mean, we've already seen such a gamut of it that I didn't think I could really be shocked by it anymore. But this one is so bad as to feel like it's from a bygone era or something. But JD Vance has been all about it, and Trump mentioned it in shorthand. He actually also referenced another right-wing conspiracy theory that is about apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado, that they're saying have been taken over by gangs. But clearly the moderators were prepared for the Springfield Haitian immigrant smear. And so then David Murr came in and said, we called the Springfield city manager. He said there's no evidence at all of animal abuse in the immigrant community. And then Trump said, in the most joyous moment, I see people talking about it on TV. And then Murr says, well, we're not getting our information from TV. We did the reporting. So, yeah.
The pet thing is, it has the cadence of the kind of anti-Semitic hate speech that you had in the 30s in Germany. That Jews are vermin, they're dirty, they're preying on, that kind of crude stuff. And yet it is also simultaneously, it's certainly not funny, but it's I don't know how to put it exactly. It's weird. Um, and someone before the debate mentioned to me yesterday how this story and the couch story is sort of a good comparison about how both sides use, kind of untrue things. That with the couch thing, no one was out. No, there was no Democrat out researching couches, right? There was no Democrat insisting it was true. It was like a gag line to rattle him, make fun of him. And there's that. And, you have this, if you haven't heard about this, this has really caught fire in the last 2 or 3 days in the right-wing media sphere. It jumped to another level, as Kate said, when J.D. Vance started bringing it up. So you've got all these influencers and independent journalists going and looking for details, but the biggest thing is no couches were going to get hurt, right? There was no couch that someone was going to get so riled up that they were going to attack a couch, right? But I'm sure you are going to have immigrants attacked over this. Maybe someone will get killed over this. This is violent incitement kind of stuff. I was actually, just one other little detail about this. Eric Erickson, who is this longtime right-wing Republican influencer, is a radio guy now, had this little mini tirade on Twitter using a word that has the two letters M and F together, good going, that J.D. Vance got, good going that now Trump said this during the debate, and you're going to have 3 days unpacking this as like a story, his upsetness. And then Christopher Rufo, the anti-DEI guy who now runs half the Florida higher education system, gets into Eric's feed and says, well, this guy at Federalist just broke that. It seems like there's evidence that someone killed geese. And Eric said, yeah, but geese aren't pets, man. It's close, but it's just, a goose is a game bird. This would mean that Haitians are acculturating to our American culture very quickly, right? They're joining the MRA and they're hunting. The desperation to try to make this true was just wild. And another thing, one of the big things, obviously coming out of last night, is that Republicans are all insisting that it was terribly that the moderators were biased against him. That Trump did actually force one direct fact check when he said that that women are allowed to execute their newborns. That the moderator said no, that's not true. That didn't happen. But of course, Republicans are going to say this since he did so poorly. But what was interesting is they gave him several open questions to really launch into her, right? There was an immigration question there. Is there anything you would have done differently? Why are you only doing this? Why are you only trying to toughen up the border now because it's the election? They gave him the same openings that they gave her. And what was striking to me is they gave him the Afghanistan question. Wasn't it a disaster? And he actually managed to lose that question. He lost the engagement about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. How do you possibly do that? That was amazing. he just he couldn't get it together. He couldn't focus, and yeah.
On the moderator piece, which is what all the right wingers are freaking out about now, right? Like the standard line is, well, of course she did better. It was 3 versus 1. And the thing is here, they only stepped in with these kind of direct fact checks twice. And it was on that the Haitian immigrant smear is a lie, and it was on there is no state in America where you can kill a baby after it is born. And I think those are really important fact checks because, as you said, both of those lies are not just Trump's kind of classic making things up. Those are calls to or justifications of violence. Those
Yeah,
are
they're
things
incitements
that
to violence.
if you believe those things and then you go and act on those beliefs, either by murdering a Haitian immigrant or by storming an abortion clinic and killing the providers, those are things that justify those actions, and you absolutely have to fact check though. That it's not in the same category of my administration had the best job production of all time. Like that can also be a lie, that can also be damaging, but it's of a different kind. And then the other way you look at it is you cannot expect symmetrical fact checks when the lying is asymmetrical. And that's just how it is. So, you can kind of look at it as, well, he was fact checked twice and she was fact checked not at all. But you could also say he was fact checked twice and he lied about 800 times. So, really, it's a pretty small fraction of everything he said that was untrue. So, I thought in that way the moderators were great. I actually think that the Harris camp could even have reason for beef because every time he had already kind of run through his answers, he just kept talking and they let him kept talking. And now I think
Or
it
come back
worked.
in when he didn't have it, when he wasn't allowed to
Exactly.
come back
And
in.
I
Yeah.
think that ultimately worked really well for her because nothing he was saying in those sections were helping him, clean up his messy answers or kind of like go back and make his point. He was just it was more of the same kind of rambling, angry, incoherent stuff. But to the degree that, oh, the moderators were on his side, it's silly. And it does loop into what you were saying before, which is she got those kind of quote unquote gotcha questions as well. Like you said, she got them on Afghanistan. She got a list of positions she has changed on and asked for justification why. She got some various prompting both on Afghanistan and with some economic stuff, kind of prodding her to be like, well, are you different from Biden? How do you break from Biden? The difference is she was really well prepared for those things. And so she either had a kind of rebuttal ready to go, or on the kind of flip-floppy question, she kind of avoided it. She addressed the
Yeah.
fracking thing because she was in Pennsylvania, and then she transitioned into my values haven't changed, and then basically did her bio, did her background of her values, and didn't really talk about how she's kind of changed at the border or whatever the other kind of like small policy points they were trying to nail her on.
Yeah, no, I mean, in each case, her answer was kind of some version of whatever, and then she would move on to talking about something else. Like on the, I mean, to me, what has always been the sort of the most substantive, because it has a broader meaning, flip flop, change, or whatever, is on Medicare for all and Obamacare. And she got that question. What happened? You supported it. They actually, and she basically said, yeah, and we focused on expanding Obamacare, and that's what we're all about now. And then she went on and talked about something else. And Trump could have come back and said, she didn't really answer the question. Sure, you were part of the Biden administration, and now you're supporting Obamacare, but why is it she didn't? And on the Afghanistan thing, I don't remember the exact words, but there was some kind of very, maybe I'm not even sure she said this, very vague kind of, I guess it wasn't perfect. And then she went on, but look at his deal, and just talked about his deal and talked about, and I have always been a little averse to sort of blaming this on Trump's deal, because Biden didn't have to follow through on Trump's deal. And to my mind, Biden was right. Biden, now they're saying, oh, he overruled everybody. That was what was necessary to get out of Afghanistan. He didn't have to follow what Trump did. And I kind of want Biden to own that he made the right decision. But Trump's deal was ridiculous. And if you were going to go ahead and withdraw, was going to make it worse. And she just kind of rubbed that in his face, and sort of like with the other shiny objects, he couldn't, he had to start talking about Abdul or all these kind of random things. And he went for it. So again, that was one of the moments where I was like, wow, what are we doing here? How did she win the exchange on Afghanistan? That's an exchange you want to emerge with as little damage as possible, not have Trump. He lost. He lost that exchange. How that was possible is still remarkable to me.
And you know what? I didn't even mind her not litigating, I think, the very valid point of when you withdraw from a war, it's messy. And that's why so many presidents who said they were going to do it didn't do it before, even though I think that's a very valid and good point, because I know it's become, for some reason, it's not journalistic neutrality to call the pullout from Afghanistan a disaster. For some reason, that's not considered editorializing. That's just considered what happened. I think that's pretty stupid, and I actually think that's a really bad incentive going forward. Like, if you're a president, why would you ever pull out of a conflict again if you're just going to get beat up for it?
And that's why we were there 10 years longer than everybody had decided. Exactly. It made no sense anymore.
That being said, if a Democrat had made a deal with the Taliban at Camp David on 9/11, that would be the end of their political career. So it doesn't trouble me that she thought that would be the quicker, zestier hit to do than to kind of fight this on more difficult terrain, which is terrain that any competent Republican politician would have forced her onto. But then Trump, as you say, got caught into this, exactly what she'd been accusing him of, like fondness for kind of big, scary foreign leader stuff, where that he's calling them by their first names and talking about like how much they liked him and everything, which it's the Taliban you're talking about, man. Like the one group that Americans have been trained to hate beyond all others.
Yeah, no, he, and it's not surprising in a way. This is who he is now. And it's not that he was, I don't want to mythologize who he was in 2015 and 2016, but he was a lot sharper. He just was. It's really obvious. The other thing is that he did not have a list of things to defend. He just criticized, right? And that's always the sort of the sweet spot of a newcomer. But he can't resist relitigating things that he's been blamed for. It was almost like, if you would have, I'd like to think I was more disciplined, but as I mentioned before, I have always felt very strongly that, again, Biden did the right thing, and not just the right thing, withdrawing and leaving our, puppetish, if not quite puppet government to fend for itself. It was going to collapse pretty quickly, especially if Trump had already undermined it the way that he had. But the point is, it was not going to go well. Remember what happened in Saigon when the U.S. finally withdrew. The reason Obama did not withdraw back in 2011 or whenever that was is the generals at the Pentagon basically overawed him. They said, it's going to be bad, dude. It's going to be bad. You've got to leave some people there. It's going to be bad. And he didn't do it. They were the generals were telling him the same thing. And look, it was kind of bad. It was ugly. And Biden, I think this is, in a way, this was one of Biden's finest moments. He said, we are pulling out. It is over. We are doing it. And someone needed to do that, and he did. Obviously, that was not in this moment. You need to let that go. Bait Donald Trump to talk about something else and move ahead.
Which is part of a more fundamental failing of Trump's, which is his mandate going into this was first and foremost to tie Harris to Biden in a way that she couldn't escape. Because we're seeing over and over in the polls a really key measure here is that people want change. We know that from the Biden-Trump matchup. You know, we learned that lesson acutely. Like, people are really tired of the same old faces. And for him, the biggest risk is that she becomes that forward-looking, exciting change candidate, and he's no longer the kind of exciting bull in the china shop that's going to burn down the swamp, right? That he's kind of yesterday's news. And you could tell that he remembered he was supposed to do that at various sporadic points where he would say, he said at one point, you know, she is Joe Biden. And he kept doing this thing where he was calling Biden her boss, which I think was an attempt to like get some sexism in there as well. But that led to one of her best encapsulations of her thesis statement that we've gotten all campaign, which was, I'm clearly not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump. And what I offer is a new generation of leadership, that's the whole game. And he gave her the opening to do that and wasn't disciplined enough to take the stuff that people didn't like from the Biden administration and be like, hey, that is the sitting vice president. She is culpable for this. He just wasn't able to do it. And, you know, that's why Republicans are so mad, because I think they wanted the moderators to do it for him. But they
Yeah.
did. They did ask questions that tied her to the unpopular policies, and she would kind of slither out of them, and then he would get distracted with whatever kind of insult was embedded in her response, and then go off on that and kind of forget his whole game plan or what he was trying to do with those questions. And I think that was particularly acute during one of her most devastating passages of the debate, which is when she said, I have traveled the world as vice president and other foreign leaders think you're an embarrassment. They're laughing at you. They think that you are an easily manipulable, you know, basically child, right?
Yeah.
Who responds to flattery and is easy to use. And I mean, God, it was almost hard. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, and it was almost hard to listen to. It was so biting.
You know, that was one of when I said earlier in the pod that there were these, you know, there's a dozen stock lines that Trump's critics have been waiting for someone to say to his face. And that was one of them. Everybody thinks you're a joke. All the leaders think you're a joke. Some of them kowtow to you because you're a joke and they know they can manipulate you. You're an embarrassment. The whole world is laughing at us that we cannot quit you. That is the truth. So many Americans have been waiting, and she said it like right to his face, you know, 10 feet away from him. She said it, and you could tell, man, it landed. It landed. He heard it. He 100% heard it.
And it's so funny that his response to that, you know, your weakness on the international stage stuff was, well, Orban loves me, so there. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, that was also part of her, like, you know, we don't want dictators, and so his character witness to not be a dictator was Viktor Orban,
Right.
who was maybe not quite a dictator, one of these you know, kind of strong men in a kind of a broken democracy, and you know, the other part is that you know, I love Hungary just as much as the next guy, but it's not a huge country, right? And there's just something a little, I don't know, like it's a medium-sized country in Eastern Europe. Like, okay, go Donald. You have you know, you've cornered the Hungarian dictator space. Like,
Right.
go dude, right? It was that was a weak moment. But you know, it really does take it took Kamala Harris knowing who Trump was and being prepared, because you look at his interviews, and you look at his you look at his speeches. It's all about various dictators who think he's awesome, the way that the country didn't treat him fairly after he was such an awesome president. This is all kind of sort of loser talk, kind of, but his people are into it, and I don't know. Like I said, she said the lines to his face that if nothing else, a lot of psychic satisfaction for a lot of Democrats. I don't know if it'll affect the election, but a lot of
The
people liked it.
the other piece of her dictator portion, which was so good, was talking about Ukraine and Russia, where she said, if you had been president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with an eye towards the rest of Europe, and he would start with Poland. And I would like you to tell the 800,000 Polish Americans who live in Pennsylvania, the degree to which you would be letting Putin eat your lunch if that was the situation, which was perhaps the most masterful foreign policy to all politics is local pirouette I've ever seen carried out on the stage. And he can't even kind of come back with any believable, I'm tough on Putin kind of stuff, because he loves Putin, right? Like it's really clear. I mean, his response was some big jumble about how, well, Putin endorsed her, he wants her to win kind of thing. Just, panic, 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 spiral, spiral, spiral.
Yeah. No, that was the other thing, and I kind of, this is maybe the only thing that I kind of wished, even though it wouldn't have made any difference, that she would have said, that he tried to say, well, his response was essentially saying they sent you there to negotiate between Putin and Zelensky, and you couldn't get it done. Well, that's not what happened. She wasn't trying to negotiate. She went there to say, he's going to invade. Here's the intelligence. Get ready. But he was floundering, but he, as we said, he was floundering on things that he shouldn't even have been talking about. He shouldn't have been talking about those things. He should have talked about inflation and the border, because that's what wins for him.
Inflation came up almost not at all. Really, the economy in general was not a huge part of that debate, which you could kind of see as being a little bit of a con for both sides. For Trump, because he loses the inflation stuff, and for Harris, because that's where she's got to make up ground, is on who voters trust with the economy. And she did, at the beginning, she did keep trying. She has this phrase that I really don't like because it sounds really consultant-y to me, but the opportunity economy thing. And she kept kind of bringing it back to that. But that's not where the bulk of the debate remained. But, only 90 minutes. I mean, the moment that it ended, she was like, let's do another. And then, of course, poor Trump, has to lumber into the spin room, which everybody knows the winning candidate does not have to subject themselves to the spin room. And, he's asked about another debate, and he's like, oh, I don't know, blah, blah, we'll see. So, I mean, the immediate reaction to it across the board from left spaces to right was, she kicked his ass,
Yeah.
I mean, right wingers were trying to blame the moderates, but you even had some, the Eric Ericksons and some on Fox News and stuff being like, yeah, she was great. He was awful. I mean, this was pretty disastrous for him.
And other kind of Republican and right wing influencers and commentators basically saying, yeah, it was, they were biased, but their bias didn't make him talk about January 6th for 20 minutes or whatever, whatever that was, that he just, again, the best they could do is say, yes, they were biased, but he also blew it. And,
right.
How could you, I don't know how it was clear cut. There's no other way to put it.
To cap the evening, the Taylor Swift endorsement dropped right as the debate ended with a nice flourish that included a picture of her and her cat, and she signed it, "Childless Cat Lady." And that's something that, the has been very speculated about in the campaign for a long time. And now we're in a position of oh,
Let me
go ahead.
ask you, have you heard anything about the degree to which that was coordinated? Or, like, did they know it was coming at the end of have we found out anything after the fact?
The campaign at least says it did not know it was coming. And to be honest, I buy that because if you had the endorsement in your pocket, I don't think you choose to deploy it on a good night. I think you save it for a bad news cycle.
Or you're not gonna say, yeah, do it after the debate, because you don't know if it's going to be good or bad, right? Like, you like, maybe you don't want to kind of use it up on a good night, but, like, you don't necessarily want to have it on a kind of a Biden debate type night, right? It's sort of, that's what made me think that she just kind of did it on her own, at least the immediate timing of it.
Yeah, I think she watched the debate and then
Like,
made the
strike while,
endorsement.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah.
she
No,
also
that
said
was my sense. Yeah.
she said in her post too that she'd become aware of these fake AI images of her endorsing Trump. So I think that also added some pressure for her to be, pretty open and transparent and at an earlier stage about how she's going to vote. Um,
Right. Right.
so,
Right.
so all of that happened, and now we're at this interesting spot because so much conventional wisdom about debates feels unreliable at this point. And so when you're trying to gauge how much does this matter? She did great. I think by all standards, it wasn't fine, it wasn't good, it was excellent. She did an almost perfect job and was helped by the fact that he was completely incompetent the whole time. Um, and in a prior lifetime, right, we might say things like, well, Hillary Clinton beat Trump in the debates. That didn't really move the needle much. Historically, debates have not had a huge effect, and that's pretty evident in the fact that we've had 3 of the last 5 winners who pretty obviously lost their first debate and then still won the election. Now I think there's and then you have the Biden debate, which obviously caused an incumbent president to drop out of the race. So that puts things on their head a little bit. And now I think we're in this liminal space where there are some, I think, cross-cutting factors here. On the one hand, you have the fact that Trump performing badly in debates is somewhat baked in. Like, I don't think there were that many people who kind of tuned in last night expecting him to pitch a no hitter and then who were just horrified, the same way that I think Democrats kind of were about Biden. You have the fact that this will probably be the only debate. So, does that change the calculus that in past debates, the first one hasn't mattered as much? Is that only because there were others that changed your impression of the person who performed badly in the first one? There's the fact that we are in the most social media dominated campaign of our lifetimes, and video clips have a disproportionate impact in that environment, and we're going to have a ton of them from last night. There's so there's this whole bundle of factors that I think it's really hard to tell how much it'll change things, but to me, the reason that this debate was important was because so many voters, the voters who don't pay attention to politics yet who still get to pick the president, say they just don't know her, that they don't know much about her. From that very foundational, elementary level, this was the chance for her to get a lot of eyeballs on her, including people who don't care about politics. Like, it's going to be very hard to be online in any capacity and see nothing from this debate, even if it's just Trump shouting about immigrants eating people's pets, right? So, from that perspective, she did great. I hope that it'll kind of move people into her column. I guess my concern is that what if it doesn't move people that much? Like, what if the polls stay relatively kind of where they are now. The scary thing about that is we don't have a ton of other events scheduled in the calendar that are these traditional many tens of millions of people watching kind of breakthrough events.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always important to remember that when your candidate does terribly, you don't switch candidates. It's like when your team blows the World Series, you don't switch teams, right? You're just really bummed. So there's definitely an aspect to that. This is not going to make any confirmed Trump supporter. They'll be disappointed. They'll be a little demoralized. It's not going to make them change their idea about Trump, except maybe a few at the margins. That is absolutely true. You made one point though about, Hillary won the debates, and that didn't help her. She lost. Sort of. I think the difference is that she won the debates by any normal, rational standard. But Trump was Trump. Trump did his Trump stuff. He did it pretty well. We didn't entirely understand that yet because we didn't kind of know the Trump world as well as we have come to know it. Trump lost as Trump. He lost on his own terms. It's not just that she did well or she got in, more good points or something like that. He failed as himself. He was scattered. He didn't land his punches. So I think she beat him in a way that Hillary never beat Trump in her debates. But I think, but as you said, who knows? We don't know if this is going to move the polls. We don't know if it's gonna nudge the trajectory a bit. I guess what I think we can say with some confidence is this: as you say, it is difficult for us to remember how new she is. She is a new political figure on the scene, despite her history in elective office, despite being vice president. She's really only been a national figure for 6 or 7 weeks. She's new, and there is a small but critical slice of the electorate who, not in a bad faith concern trolling way, but in a good faith sense, like, who I want to be sure who she is. Is she up to being president? What are her positions? What's she going to do? That is real. And as I've argued in lots of contexts over the years, what really matters in these presidential campaigns is performances of power and dominance. Can you do it? And that's much more important than, like, are you for Obamacare? Are you for this expansion of Obamacare and this subsidy and all this kind of nonsense? Do you have the heft to be a dominant force? And she needed to start sealing that deal, making that sale with that, what is it, floating 3 or 4% of the electorate who is kind of in that, in that place. What's she gonna be like, all that kind of stuff. And I think she did that. She showed that she could go in there with Donald Trump, who is, whether you hate him or love him, a dominant presence in our politics. And she went in and she totally held her own with him. He did not dominate her. I mean, she dominated him. That's sort of icing on the cake, that she really kind of humiliated him, but that she had the presence in a totally unscripted, uncontrolled, volatile, unpredictable situation to kind of own the moment. And is this going to change the race? God, I hope so. I would love to see her like 6 points ahead in a week, and like we're all going to have a calmer fall and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea what that's going to happen. If I had to predict, I would say a very slight move in her direction. But I think to me, how I understand this is that there's a series of things that she needs to do to get towards a victory on November 5th. And doing what she did last night was the first critical step in doing that, and she did it. And so she has a checklist, and this was one of the biggest things on the checklist since it's the biggest audience, to say who you are, say what you're for, show again those performances of dominance and power, and she did that. So she checked off a big thing from the list that is necessary to get to a victory. So that's great. And is it gonna everything else? Who knows? But I think I'm highly confident that she needed to do that thing, and she did it. So cool.
We're also just in a landscape where, because of the calcification, you just don't see huge bumps in either direction, which is kind of why Democrats have been so exuberant since Biden dropped out, because it was a relatively very large bump and she was climbing every day. But to some degree, I think you could also see that as she climbed back to where you would kind of expect a well-liked, reasonably kind of talented, competent Democratic politician to be running against Trump. And then the rest of it is getting those marginal, difficult to reach, uninterested people. And if she made up ground with that group through this debate, which to some degree she will, right? I mean, we're just debating how big of an advance she'll make, and she'll make up some ground with them, and that's a big deal. And it also kind of sets the tone and the narrative arc for this final sprint of the campaign, which she is now kind of kicked off by rising to the moment with her convention speech, rising to the moment with the debate, right? I mean, she's just has been really successfully kind of checking all these boxes. And now I hope that she is handsomely rewarded for last night's performance with a massive kind of move of undecided voters. But she did the best performance she could possibly do, and if that moves things even a point or two, I mean, that's the difference between winning and losing in a political environment that is so calcified on both sides.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And again, to me, like in what I wrote last night, what I'm going to write later today, that's really the kind of journalistically the sort of the challenge of capturing this is at the same time to note this is still going to be a close election. It's still going to be like just a hard slog in the final 2 months of this campaign. Hopefully, it's gonna get some marginal improvement for her, to be realistic about that, but also not let that take away from the fact or kind of pull our punches about the fact that she totally dominated him. I mean, I've never seen someone lose a debate that thoroughly as he did. Both are true at the same time, and we're just going to have to wait and see now how those two realities interact, because uh, as you say, highly calcified, to the extent that there's been some ebbing of her support that has kind of freaked people out over the last couple weeks. It's really about a point difference. Biden was down like 3 points. She moved to 3 points ahead, and maybe she's fallen back closer to 2. Right, where the available terrain is very small, and look, like in all things in life, certainly in politics, you've got your checklist, and what you can control is whether you can check your boxes on your checklist. And still, in all things, there are certain things that other people control, and there are certain things that fate controls. But you can work through your checklist, and she's working through her checklist.
And fundamentally, we're not going to know about the polling bump for maybe more like 2 weeks after this. So don't let any of that uncertainty kind of dim the glow of, seeing her just
Yeah.
knock him out. I mean, she
Yep.
wiped the floor with him. She humiliated him. She was great. She was, she hit her points head on. it was a great night for Democrats. I mean, couldn't be happier. So do it's the Democratic tendency, especially in this high stakes election, to immediately spring to a place of anxiety. It's the safe zone, but enjoy it. After the last debate, everybody really deserves to at least spend a few days kind of watching the clips, enjoying the memes, and just drinking it all in.
Just to conclude on one point, there's a Democratic pollster named Jeff Guerin. He said this on Twitter last night, and I think it is another one of these certainly accurate things about the outcome of this debate, is that what made it so strong for her is that she simultaneously energized her supporters and successfully reached out to swing voters. Now, what we're going to see in polls of swing voters, who knows? But everybody knows that those were the things that she needed to do to appeal to swing voters. And that's hard, to get your people charged up and the undecided people, coming your way. But that connects with the point you just made, Kate. She energized her people. So be energized, because she totally kicked his ass. Right. She did. So be pumped about it. And I guess my point is, it's not just, I don't know, letting yourself eat 2 servings of ice cream at a weak moment. You should be pumped. You're being energized is a form of activism. She needs you to be energized. You're worrying about what might happen is not helping her. You should be excited that she kicked his ass, because you need to be excited and have the excitement be infectious, and talk her up to your friends who maybe don't vote all the time. Send her another $20, all that kind of stuff. So it's not just that you don't have to be guilty about it. You should do it. Your enthusiasm is a form of activism. That's really that's how it worked. And I will say, I wanted to just credit Guerin, because with all of the blows going back and forth last night, he saw that. I mean, it's the kind of thing a pollster will see, right? To be able to, are you doing both those things at once? And I think he really had that accurate. Anything else we need to touch base on?
Nope.
Okay. I think that is it for this episode of our podcast. Thank you for joining us as usual. And soak it up. Feel the energy. Watch the replays. Watch the memes. And we will talk to you next week.
See you then.
Later.
The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor-in-chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen.